Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. This is your Matchday coverage. I'm Paul John Dykes. I'm joined by Tony Haggerty, and we are going live on all the usual platforms except for some strange reason Twitter. So whilst I get the first response from Tony Haggerty, I will be sharing the YouTube link on the Twitter page. Tony, a lot of people don't tune into the pre-match and the halftime, so we'll go through the entire game as a post-match. Let's have a wee chat about the performance, which I thought in parts was excellent, but the fact that we do still ship a goal here and there, which is becoming a wee bit of a concern. I don't want to be too hard on the likes of Welsh and Hart, who I think were probably to blame for the 2 goals, but it is still a wee concern that we can ship goals sometimes pretty easily.
Yeah, I think that's the only negative on today, isn't it? First 20 minutes, terrific. Get yourself 2 goals ahead. Concede a sloppy goal from Dundee's first attack, meaningful attack from across. And then you put the game to bed with some scintillating 5 minutes, actually. You know what I mean? 10 minutes after the break. Really good. You thought 4-1. This is going to be another 5-6, possibly 7-1, something like that. And then Joe Hart does the old Superman job, comes for a ball he's never getting, and you can see it again. So, yeah, I mean, it's a worrying. I can say it's not so worrying when you're that far ahead today, but it's a worry moving forward that you continue to concede, because a lot of the goals that Celtic are conceding are bread and butter crosses into the box, aren't they?
They are. I think it was an interesting stat, 8 out of 9, and I know that in terms of our defensive record, it is excellent when you compare it across the league. Yeah. Dundee United had a great record, and they've gone out yesterday and taken an absolute tanking at the hands of Hearts. So, yeah, absolutely. I'm not turning this into a negative. It is just probably the only concern from this afternoon's early kickoff, because other than that, we showed in spells like how absolutely scintillating Celtic can be when they're playing at full throttle. We've got a talent in Jota who we are raving about him week on week. And I think that, we've said it time and time again, whatever it takes to get him in on a permanent deal, get the deal done, because he's absolutely outrageously talented. And sometimes, Tony, you get a player who just fits into a particular club that at a stage of their career where they maybe need that adulation that he's obviously not getting at Benfica because he's not playing. I think that a lot of the comments I've been seeing from Benfica pages on Twitter, etc., when he came to the club, they weren't too fussed about him. He wasn't a first pick. He could come to Celtic and become an absolute hero at this club and also be part of huge successes at this club. He's the type of player, I think, that if he was to do that, although everything he says has been positive, it would be a stepping stone for him because he has so much talent and he's at that age, Tony, where he could have another big move down the line, but do whatever needs to be done to get that permanent deal over the line when the time comes.
Yeah, of course, I think Jota's tailor-made for Celtic and Celtic are tailor-made for Jota. As you see, it's that marriage of convenience, isn't it? At a point in, his career that he needs that arm round him, needs to be loved. And there's no better place for a player if they want to be loved and if they turn it on than Celtic. There's few better places. And you know what pleased me about today? One moment that I thought was brilliant. See when Jota set up Kyogo for the second, and I think every player, bar Joe Hart, ran behind the goal. Every player was celebrating that 4th goal. And I thought, yep. And that was what spoke about the pre-match that Jota was saying, we're building a family here. I thought, yep, you really are. I saw it for myself when they went to celebrate with the fans. And every player was there. Juranovic was jumping about. Like Looney, Carter-Vickers was going off his nut. And you're thinking, that's what you want to see.
They get it. But Tony, where were all the players when Tony Ralston needed to get the ball back when it went over the advertising board? They weren't as quick to go over and give him a hand, were they?
I was quite shocked by that as well. Nobody, not even a supporter or a Dundee ball boy or somebody, guys jumped over a kind of gate. He's jumped down into some kind of pit, hasn't he, to go and get it? It's frightening. But players can injure themselves easily by doing something like that, jumping over it, and the way they kind of
Who's hiding in the pit? That's the question. Is Barkas down there? What about Ayeti? Is he down there? Joe Porter, welcome back, Joe. You've been a big supporter of ACSOM for some time, so welcome to the show. You're watching on YouTube. That fourth goal was a thing of scrumptious beauty. When you're talking about the likes of Jota, it's easy to use such terms. We do have in our midst the potential for one of the most exciting front lines I've seen in my Celtic supporting life, Tony.
Yeah, without a doubt. We spoke about them, Christendom, the new Three Amigos and stuff, but I think if you're looking at today, Jota, Kyogo and Ralston, and even I've got a big Beaton. I thought Beaton was really good today. His passing was crisp, it was pretty solid. He didn't really put a foot wrong, but I think those four players in particular shone today. I mean, Ralston's got 3 assists. This is a guy who just sort of said to Stevie Clark, just in case you're watching.
I don't understand. I honestly don't understand the omission from that squad.
Well, he might think it's too early, but I think that was a wee reminder today. Ralston, just sort of saying, here if you need me. And 3 assists, doesn't get any better than that, and 3 quality assists as well.
And that's him up too. When you look at him as a, we were talking before the game about the kind of young element of the Celtic defence. We know that Juranovic at left back is 26 and Joe Hart is 34. They bring the experience, but the other 3 are in their early 20s. Tony Ralston playing just his 43rd game for Celtic. He scored 6 goals. He's now got 7 assists. But when you look through that defence, there's goals in that defence, Tony, and that's what I think sometimes frustrates me from the perspective of our lack of goals from corner kicks, because we do have goals in that defence. Tony Ralston can get a goal. Juranovic has scored a couple, albeit 2 from the penalty spot, and Carter Vickers, couple of goals to the good. Stephen Welsh, couple of goals to the good. But I would expect, particularly the latter 2 there, to be more dangerous at corner kicks. I think you made a good point at half-time. Julian, when he comes back, he's actually going to be very effective. If he comes back, the player that we remember in both boxes.
Yeah, in both boxes. He has to be, because those kind of corners and crosses are tailor-made for a guy like Julian, you know what I mean? So that be interesting to see what happens when he comes back, and if he does hit any kind of form or stride that he did before he was out injured. But yeah, that is an interesting dynamic. But you look at that team, there's goals all over the park, Paul. Mm-hmm. Goals all over the park. So that's what pleases you.
Unless it drops to the foot of Giakoumakis. Listen, that's tongue-in-cheek. I want to talk about him. I do want to talk about him. We've not seen a great deal. The start that he got was the game that Celtic didn't fill themselves, cover themselves in glory. It was a poor performance. It was a bad day at the office. We know all that. He missed the penalty. But I have been impressed with quite a bit of his kind of hold-up play in the 2 games against Ferencvaros. I thought he'd done particularly well holding the ball up. But he's come on today and he's looked like that guy we saw at Livy again against Livingston. And I just hope that it's all to do with a lack of game time in a Celtic jersey. And that's why we're not seeing the best of Giakoumakis, because I've seen a lot of good from him. But again, today he's come on and he's missed a cracking opportunity. James A. Forrest put it on a plate for him.
Yeah, I think you touched on it there. I think there could be such a thing as trying too hard to impress. Mm-hmm. You say a lack of game time as well, but again, I go back to it, strikers, just take a breath, relax. That should be meat and drink when Forrest lays it back to him. Just, get it on. He doesn't even get it on target. I mean, he skies it horribly, gets it wrong. I think maybe Andy Walker was saying he slipped as he made connection. I'm not entirely convinced of that, but if you're a striker, you just focus on getting that on target. Forrest cuts that back to Jota or Kyogo. Where does it end up? Probably ends up in the back of the net, doesn't it? So I think there's a lot of good things that he does as well. He's hold-up play, and he does the old-fashioned rumbling of defenders up and all that kind of stuff, So, there's some attributes that he has. So he just has to relax in front of goal and not let that penalty affect him. It's gone against them. Just, that's it. Put it to bed, park it, fine, and just get your head up and be the striker that we all hope you will be. Scoring regular and coming on and making a contribution. That spoke about that pre-match. Got to come on and make a contribution. And you were talking about there's some kind of verve or Ashcroft with Lee Ashcroft on the park, and I said, well, we could basically say the subs don't work. You know what I mean? Maybe the subs didn't work today. You could maybe say that, but they will work in future, and they have to be. You have to convince these guys that when they're getting their opportunity, that they have to contribute, make an impact.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I felt that at 60 minutes when we made those subs, and I know we got the 2 goals, particularly early in the second half, to put the game, too far away from any kind of comeback from Dundee, any meaningful comeback anyway. And we got the first 2 goals in the first 19 minutes. So yes, I remember reading somewhere that if you were to look at the stats, and I'm not comparing managers before anybody thinks I am, if you look at the stats under Jockstein, the amount of goals that were scored, Tony, in the first 10 minutes after a team chalk, it was quite incredible. So if the foot had gone off the throttle, 10 minutes after the half-time interval, it was certainly back on the throttle. And I think we got a wee bit of that today. But at 60 minutes, when we made the 2 subs, I felt that we did regress a wee bit. And listen, when you're taking a player of the quality of Kyogo off the park, that's going to happen. And it wasn't long before Dundee got what was proven to be a consolation by the aforementioned Ashcroft. But it just shows you, not just the contribution when he's got the ball, Tony, but see off the ball, Kyogo's contribution is incredible. He stretches that defence left, right and centre.
Yeah, you saw it for yourself today. You lost something when Jota and Kyogo left the park. You lost something in an attacking sense. It's all right saying you brought on like 3 kind of attack-minded players, but again, they didn't do much, did they? Or didn't do much favour. No, didn't influence the game in any great shape or form. So you wanted to go on and win 5-1, 6-1. We created a couple of opportunities. Giakoumakis missed the best one, arguably when Forrest goes through and then tees it up for him. But that apart, they didn't create much after that, did they? When those guys went off, And I get that the game's put to bed, and but it just shows you how easy it is. That was a hopeful ball into the box. Hart's gone AWOL for once, and Dundee get back. Well, as you say, it's a consolation goal, but the concession of those goals at small margins, you just need to kind of cut that out, and Ange made those substitutions, but still a fair bit of the game to go, didn't he?
He did, aye. There's an opportunity to make an impact, Tony. That's the big thing. And there's a comment coming through from one of our viewers there saying, when was the last time a sub made an impact? I get that when players are coming into that high intensity, which we're in the flow of by 60 minutes in, it might be hard to adapt to that. It might take them a wee while to get into it. But I reckon 30 minutes is a good enough time for anybody to get into the game. By that time, the intensity is down because the game's won. It is won at 4-1. It's beyond Dundee to come back. By the way, at halftime, we mentioned your man Tony Ralston, and for as good and as sexy as the play is when Jota's got the ball, I'm giving my man of the match to Tony Ralston, and I'll tell you why, right? Because when he came in after Dubai in January, and I'm not bringing that up to have a dig at anybody who was involved in that trip, but when he came in for that game against Livy, I had the audacity to say that he was the best player on the park in a Celtic jersey. And a lot of people couldn't accept that because it was Tony Ralston. I think we're over that now. I'm looking at that game, and for me, it was a total standout.
Yeah. Listen, you get 3 standouts there. Ralston, Kyogo and Jota. Right? Those 3 are the reason you won the game today. Right? And you won it comfortably. And, Big Beaton wasn't far behind him in terms of his display. The rest were fairly competent. No real poor performers. But you noticed when the substitutions were made, there was a flatness to it. It went from that high in the 10 minutes after half time. As you see, the goals are scored after the team talk and all that. They just kind of, they kind of went, right, that's it. Another kind of that feeling, 3 points in the bag. But you wanted that relentlessness about them, didn't you? You want them to be more clinical. Go and pulverise Dundee. Because we said at half time they were pretty poor, Dundee. And then within a few minutes you've kind of given them another cheap goal. And this is not negativity. This is just commenting on what you're seeing. I wanted Celtic to go and pummel Dundee. I wanted them to win 6-1.
You know why I want that? The reason I want that, Tony, is because you have afternoons like we did against Livingston where you can't buy a goal.
Yes.
So see when things are clicking and it's going as well as it was at that point. Yeah. I'm the same as yourself. I want to completely capitalise on that. And you know what? By the end of the season, you don't know how important the goal tally is going to be.
That's it. You goal difference may come into it, and you've fell victim to that in championships run-ins in the past. So just go and keep going, as Anne said. Go right to the death, and try and just get that goal difference up so that it does make a difference come the end, or it makes a difference to you that you're in that, that driving seat, that pole position, if it does come down to it. So be relentless, be clinical, but that's what happens when those influential players come off at the same time. You lose that edge, you lose that kind of driving force, and you lose that kind of cutting the edge up front, basically, and it was noticeable today. And that's not having a dig at Giakoumakis, who, given more game time, could end up being as prolific as Jota or Kyogo. But, it's too early to be judging jury on him. But you just want him to, for himself, more than anything. I just don't want that penalty to be something that is dwelling on his mind. And I just think he does some things that are really good. But I do feel that some players could try too hard to impress.
They second guess themselves a lot of the time, Tony, at that stage. They want to, prove to a new crowd, a new set of teammates, a new manager. But, I mean, last season he only missed one penalty in the Dutch top division. He's missed that one already for Celtic. So let's hope, if given the opportunity, he doesn't miss any more. But you mentioned Ange Postecoglou, and I remember, going into the game against Aberdeen up at Pittodrie. Now, incredibly, it was only on the 3rd of October, the beginning of last season, and you and I had sat together watching the Leverkusen game a few nights before, and there was all this chat and all these rumours about Ange has gone by Monday, Ange has gone by Friday, all this stuff. You remember? Yeah. And we've gone up to Pittodrie, and I thought we actually ground that victory out. I don't think that we were particularly good in the second half, but we win the game. We win the game. And you see the reaction at the end of the game. You're talking about Jota and talking about a Celtic family. He scores the winner. The players and the gaffer, they're going up to get the adulation of the Celtic fans up at Pittodrie. And, there was that moment where you're looking at Ange, and we've seen it with Lenny, we've seen it with Ronnie Dyler up at Pittodrie, as it happens. And there was a thing that we discussed, I think, on the Monday on the Bulletin, and it was around, is this a moment? Is this a turning point? Yeah. And it has proven to be. I mean, we were very disappointed with a 0-each draw against Livingston. That Aberdeen result came after a demoralising defeat in Europe against Leverkusen. The 1-1 at home to Dundee United, which was very disappointing. And although we had beaten Wraith Rovers 3-0, prior to that, we had gone to Livingston and they beat us 1-0. So we were at that point, it was a very important win. We knew that. But we were then facing a run of fixtures between Pittodrie and the international break, where, and I think everybody would admit, going to Pittodrie, Fir Park, Easter Road, and away to Ferencváros, followed by this game today, that if we've only dropped 2 points, then it would have been acceptable back on the 3rd of October. That's where we are just now going into the latest international break. And I think that, generally speaking, in isolation, the Livingston result was very disappointing. But overall, every single result since Pittodrie, for me, as a collective, I just think that we've weathered the storm, and Ange has weathered that storm.
Sea change, I think, is the phrase. There was a sea change that day at Pittodrie. Because not only did Celtic win, they won ugly, which hadn't been a trait of Ange's team up until that moment. It was what a galvanising effect it had on everybody. We spoke before about those fixtures that were coming up, and we were talking about in the realms of, can Celtic win any of those 3 away games? The way they were at that moment in time. But I tell you what, the job is done to steer them. Because October was meant to be a black month for Celtic, so we were told. This is, as you say, this could be the death knell for Ange, stuff like that. And, which was far too early for that. Nobody ever called for his head. Certainly not on this platform. But we were saying he has to get results.
Yeah, you've got to win more than 50% of your games, which was the stat at that time. Yeah.
So that's what we were pointing out, those statistical facts. But by God, he's grasped it, eh? And we've gone on, what's that, 7 or 8 games? We've won 7 out of 8 with those 2 points dropped. And playing sometimes rip-roaring, free-scoring, never boring. Other times we've ground it out. And other times it's been controlled, it's been measured, it's been composed. So we've discovered different ways of winning in all of those, that 8-game period. And also there's been that blip where we couldn't buy a goal against Livingston that day and even missed from the penalty spot. So I think the Celtic fans are a bit in your hand off for that. And you're a bit in your hand off for that. And I think Ange caught a moment in time as well with that celebration at Pittodrie. He kind of knew. That's when it kind of sunk in. He went, right, this is the base and the platform upon which I'm going to build this team. And we've gone forward from that moment onwards. You know, and big up to him. And, you know, he's taken everything in the chin. He's taken criticism and he's taken all sorts of questions. And, you know, at this moment in time, he's answering them now. Because he's always banged on about when he gets the team that he wants, no players back. And we got all that. We were just frustrated at the fact that as a Celtic manager, there's only kind of one style of football, and it's winning football. You've just got to win. You know, and that 50% start up to us on this platform. That's what up to us. It wasn't Ange. You know, it wasn't him personally per se, but people took that as being us having a dig at Ange. We've never had a dig at Ange because I think to a man and woman on this pod, we actually love Ange. We're firmly behind what he's doing and the road in which he's taken this team, and we're excited by it all. You just don't want to say too much because it all comes crashing down again. But at the moment, it's good to watch. But there are things that you can tweak, things that you can make better, and things you can improve on, like every football team.
But the big thing is, Tony, when you're watching every 90 minutes of football that Celtic play, we talk about what went well and the nuances of what could improve, and that's fine. I think there's quite a few comments coming through in relation to the performance of Stephen Welsh as well. He's a player that I've championed. He's a player that I'd love to see in a Celtic jersey for years to come. But I think there was a couple of occasions this afternoon where the defensive qualities of Starfelt, and this isn't me bigging up a player because he's not on the team, because I've been critical of Starfelt, but the defensive qualities sometimes of Starfelt can be taken for granted, maybe by myself, maybe by others on ACSOM. But to put your head on a ball that's coming in, just to get that tackle, and I don't think he looks comfortable on the ball. I don't think that his passing's tremendous, particularly on the left-hand side. But sometimes the basic defensive things is what Starfelt's doing well. And it has gone under the radar a wee bit. That's maybe what Stephen Welsh has still got to work on, because he was caught in no man's land in between 2 Dundee players and ended up taking a wee swan dive to the deck when they've scored their first goal. We've seen it against Livy previously. And I'm not sitting here thinking I'm going to have a go at Welsh. I also don't think that it's time to start tinkering with that until Starfelt comes back. And then there's a decision to be made. And by tinkering, I mean Liam Scales is another option, of course. And then there's a decision to be made when Julian comes back. And it's all about who's my best two from, I would guess, Julian, Starfelt and Carter Vickers, with Welsh as a very able backup.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw today what Starfelt actually brings in his absence. Runs a lot of headers, puts a lot of guys off, jostles people, great. We accept that he's not the greatest defender in terms of a ball at his feet and playing it out from the back, yeah. But see that basic art of defending, that jostling people, winning the ball in the air and being tidy that way. Would he have made a difference today in both of those goals? Probably. He would have contested the balls coming in, wouldn't he have, for a start? So, yeah, maybe have some buts. And it's not being harsh on Welsh. You just have to see that Welsh is still a young boy learning his craft. You said at the start, 34 appearances or something, was it 23?
Yeah, well, I was interested to realise that we only had 3 players on the park in the starting lineup with more than 50, but that today was Stephen Welsh's 34th appearance.
34th appearance, because it was Russell's birthday, he managed it. So, so that's still relatively inexperienced, isn't it, for a Celtic defender? So he's still learning his craft as well. which is why, like the first goal, he'll get caught underneath it, caught in between, and I get that. But when you're a defender, there's no hiding place from those positional errors. If you're positionally in the wrong place or you make an error in defence, then there's a high chance it's going to be a goal, and it'll be highlighted, like the goalkeeper. He came out for a ball he's probably not entitled to get, but he's probably came out for that ball because he's maybe not been too confident in Welsh attacking it. And even after that, Paul, when Dundee threw another cross ball in, we were lucky not to concede a penalty because Giakoumakis is tugging and Carlton Vickers is tugging a Dundee boy's shirt, and Ashcroft went down and they gave it against Ashcroft. So the referee saw something that Ashcroft maybe did, but you're running that risk. And say he gives it the other way and they score and it goes 4-3. These are all kind of things that, it didn't happen, but when you saw the replay, it could very well have been a penalty for Dundee. They had a case, they had a shout, so these are the things that they can work on, can make better, can tidy up, because there's still that sloppiness and carelessness in defence, conceding unnecessary and needless goals. Is it nitpicking? Yeah, of course it is, especially when we've been scintillating in the attacking front. But there are times, as you said, you rightly pointed out, you get days like Livingston when you're attacking your 3, you'll no bail you out. So
yeah,
you've got to do everything right or do things better, and we can defend better. You've got no qualms about your middle to front functioning and being able to score goals and bulge the net. That's not your concern at all. Your concern is still at the back of the pack and the personnel that he has, that he's rotating and trying to make sure that he gets a kind of settled defence. And hopefully they can take on board the lessons of conceding to they were cheap goals, weren't they? Today?
They were cheap goals, yeah. And as you say, though, it puts you in that position where 4-2 can be precarious if a decision goes your way, against you rather, in the box. It's important that diamond at the back, Hart, Cameron Carter-Vickers, and at the moment Starfelt, that's your 3 first picks when fit. And when Julian comes back in, I think it's going to solidify that. Still not sure where Julien's going to play. I don't know who's going to make way for him. At this moment in time, I've been far more enthused with Carter-Vickers as a defender. I think he brings a lot to the side, and he really stabilises that side as well. Let's talk about the fact that you've got a player there in Beaton who I thought played pretty well today. He'd probably be my 4th in terms of who played the best today, Tony. Very assured. He does slow things down, takes his time, makes the pass. And he's a player, along with Tommy Rogic and along with Anthony Ralston, that had they left in the summer, they probably would have left with not too much of a fanfare. We would have, looked back fondly on what Tommy Rogic gave us time and time again. But, they look to be coming to the end, the natural end of their Celtic careers. And I think it's only fair that we give Ange Postecoglou the credit that is due for maybe not Beaton yet, but revitalising the careers of such players as Anthony Ralston and Tommy Rogic, and perhaps near Beaton, because again, I don't think in the fullness of time he's going to be a first pick when everybody's fit. But you need players like Beaton. You need, reliable, adaptable players like near Beaton in a squad if you're going to go and really make a challenge for this title this season.
We spoke about it pre-match, and we'll re-emphasise the point. I put that down to solid man management by Ange Postecoglou. He brought, big him up for the fact that he's brought in the likes of Kyogo, who's just an infectious, he's just an infectious wee character, and it's rubbed off in the dressing room. But to come in and say to Ralston, say to Beaton, say to Tom Rogic, you have a future here. Here's why. Here's how you're going to fit into my team. I mean, that's down to football management, Paul, and being good at it. Which is the things that people don't really see about Ange. To get a tune out of Tom Rogic. Tom Rogic was away. We spoke about that the pre-match. He'd signed and sealed a deal to, I think it was Qatar, wasn't it? You said for Qatar?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he was out the door. And if Ralston followed him and Beaton followed him, Celtic supporters wouldn't have batted an eyelid. You know, and some of them might.
They were concentrating on the big three, weren't we? Ayer, Edward, Christie.
Yep. Some people might have said at that point, good riddance to them, you know. But to come in and take guys who are probably at low ebb, because they're no daft, they know what the supporters' thoughts are about them, they know what maybe people saying about them and things that have been written about them, especially Ralston. You know, Ralston, imagine being in Ralston's shoes. This right back's coming in, right back's in, and the first casualty of that's going to be you. You know, he read that constantly for almost 2 months, didn't he? And then
you look at the right backs that have come in since Ralston made his debut. You know, Ralston makes his debut at 17 under Ronnie Dyler, Tony. Mm-hmm. And at that point, Mikael Lustig's your first choice, number 2. Yeah. Look at the amount of right backs that have come in between that debut and Tony Ralston being your first pick at right back. And you've got a lot with international credentials as well.
Yeah.
You've got Daniel Toljan, you've got Maurice Bauer, you've got El Hamid, Jeremy Frimpong, John Joe Kenny. And, you know, there's 5 in the 5 years that we've brought in. Mm-hmm. And Tony Ralston has shown the strength of character and the mental fortitude to come through that and give his all on the training park so that the manager that comes in sees the fact that we've got a guy who's willing here, gives him initially that 1-year deal. And I don't think anyone could argue with the extension on that.
No, without a doubt. And also, and I would say the same about Nir Beaton, who's clearly watched that, and Ange said to him, right, you know, moving forward, I'm going to need you. And every time I need you, you're going to have to do me a turn. You know? And, you know, players like Nir Beaton know that moving forward, they might not be long-term future, but as long as you can turn around to them and say, you're solid, you're reliable, you're dependable, you know, and Nir Beaton hasn't been that in years gone by. But under Ange, he seems to have kind of grasped that nettle, hasn't he?
After a poor start. It's got to be said after that poor start against Midtjylland.
Yeah, but poor start in terms of the fact that he's not a defender.
No.
You know,
that's the fact that we were so thin on the ground.
That role is that anchor role. You know, like it or lump it, and he might slow the play down and we get all that, but that's where he is. That's his best. That's where he's most effective. You know, and he can influence it as such, where he can break things down and he can shunt the ball to football players. Maybe not as quick as Ange would like in the team, but he does it well. You know, he has done it well the past few games, and he can be trusted in there because he's away from harm and he's away from danger.
He's approaching 250 appearances, Tony. He's coming up for 9 years at the club. And with the transition that we're going through, I think it's important to retain players like him who know the club to that degree. Yeah. It's a bit like Tommy Rodgick, you know, over 200 games, 9 years at the club, a similar age, maybe a couple of years younger than Nir Beaton, but it's important to have enough of those players in that dressing room to implement to the newbies, this is what Celtic is, this is the fabric of the club.
And also as well, if they're listening to the manager, then he's clearly getting through. You know, it's clearly the penny's dropping with everybody. I need you all, you're a vital part of this team moving forward. If we want to be a successful team, then going to need everybody on board. You know, everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet, and there doesn't seem to be too many dissenting voices now at the club, does there?
Well, the only dissent, we never spoke about it before or at half time, but we will speak about it now, is obviously there was another protest at the stadium today over the club's decision, the apparent decision, to name Bernard Higgins in a superior role within the club's security. And anyone who has followed the offensive behaviour at the Football Act and the debacle that was will know that he was pivotal in the implementation of that and the criminalisation of many of the times honest football fans, Tony. You know, even the very fact that you were going to games and being filmed as if you were a criminal. You know, there were, for example, if you went for a pint before the game with someone who was on a list of risk supporters, you became an associate. You yourself would have turned up in a briefing document with a picture of you and your national insurance number and everything else about you that, you know, even down to, for example, where you work and what your registration number is on your vehicle. You become part of an intelligence package. And that's what the offensive football Behaviour Act created. It created a monster which thankfully was repealed. And there were certain elements of that within the Celtic fans who were pivotal and influential in the repealing of that act. So it's absolutely no surprise that Celtic fans are protesting against a figure who would be deemed to be the enemy, Tony, becoming part of the inner sanctum of Celtic Football Club. So we're talking about the football, we're getting excited and enthused by Ange Postecoglou, but there is a backdrop at the moment. And obviously there was a protest at the game today. So that is the only kind of dissent that I can see at the moment. People are not prepared to allow the club to make an appointment as divisive as that.
And I think that's the word, isn't it? He's divisive, So, and it's on Celtic. If Celtic make this appointment, then they're clearly saying to the Green Brigade, we're taking you head on. That's the message that I derive from that. And so, it detracts from everything that the club's doing at the minute on the park. I don't like to see these protests. I just think that it's a negative slant, that takes away from what you're achieving on the park, and they're playing pretty well at this minute and could be doing good things, but I don't think the Green Brigade's right to protest, but just somehow I always feel that there's a time and a place for it, and don't know if today was that time and was that place, but they'll always back their own corner and say, well, we can do what we want, and then protest whatever way we see fit. But to me, if this appointment of Bernard Higgins is made by the Celtic board, then there's a clear battle line drawn there, isn't there? And they're going head to the Green Brigade, and it's unsavoury, isn't it? You just don't want to see it around the club, because things are kind of, as I say, looking good on the park, and you don't want anything to detract from that. What Ange and the players are doing on the park.
No, there is definitely a feeling of that. My biggest concern is who at the club thought this was a good idea. I mean, you hear read the room. Nobody's reading the room, Tony. This is the Green Brigade. Well, Celtic shared Green Brigade being a big part of that, massive presence home and away. Saying the ball's in your court, hence the tennis balls. At first I thought it was pies. And then, we realised it was tennis balls that had been thrown on the park. The ball's in your court. The decision to be made is Higgins or the fans. If they go for Bernard Higgins and they make that appointment, they will be going toe-to-toe with a very influential part of the Celtic fan base. So, on the one hand, we want the success back at the club. On the other hand, there are still issues behind the scenes at Celtic. We know that. We had a CEO in place for 72 days. We took 106 days to appoint a new manager. For as much as they try and advise us otherwise, the first choice manager turned us down. I'm happy that he did, because we've got Ange Postecoglou, Tony, and I'm just going to celebrate what we've got. I'm not looking back ruefully at the fact that Eddie Howe turned us down. I'm quite happy with Ange, but it is going to rumble on, and the club, I feel, have disengaged. There's still that lack of engagement. Michael Nicholson's now the interim CEO at the club. Massive job in his hands. Don't know if that will become permanent, Tony. But what will be permanent is the dissent from Celtic supporters who will not accept the appointment of such a divisive figure. So I look at that, and I hear that there might even be further protests in the planning. So we'll see how that goes. The international break, is that when the club are going to make this announcement, when the fans aren't in the stadium? I wouldn't put it past them, Tony.
I wouldn't put it past them either, but my thoughts, and what I am, I'm an out-and-out football man, Paul. My thoughts are always first, second and thirdly about the football. And at this moment in time, things are going well for Celtic, and anything that happens off the park in terms of protest, it's a distraction, but it will always be about the football for me, and what's happening in terms of the management and the players and the results. And at this moment in time, that's the thing that's functioning pretty well at the minute. And long may that continue.
One final point then on the football. We've watched, and although I don't think the substitutes made a massive change this afternoon, we've watched a team playing a brand of football. And yeah, there was a couple of wee moments, Tony, and we've shipped a couple of goals. We were in no fear of losing that game or dropping points today, because the quality was so far in advance to Dundee, who will be fighting a relegation battle this season. No disrespect to them, but that's the way it's going to pan out. We're watching a football team here who I think we've got 4 bodies that will need to be shipped out. And I'm not talking about the kind of younger guys who need game time, like, Ewan Henderson, whether or not he has a future at Celtic. There's a few in that camp. But what we've got Bolingoli, we've got Barkas, Ajeti, and I'm now including Sorrow in that category. Now, they've all cost us a few quid. We know Ajeti and Barkas, £5 million. Bolingoli, best part of £3 to £3.5 million. Sorrow, maybe £2 to £2.5 million. And they'll all be on decent wages. Now, you ship those 4 players out, Tony, and the fact that they're not on the bench today would suggest they're not in Angie's plans, and they've probably not been in the plans for a while. All 4 players have had they've all had a crack at the whip from Ange. If we ship them out and we can bring another 3 quality additions into this squad who would be on that bench today, Tony, bolstering the bench, bolstering the squad, pushing for a first-team jersey, I think what we'll see in the second half of this season is far more consistency. Because those 4 players at the moment are not contributing one iota. And we can bring players in, some who you've already mentioned, perhaps from the Japanese league, who may make the same kind of impact as an Abada, Kyogo, a Jota. And that in itself is a frightening prospect.
Well, I tell you what, Paul, see if we ship those 4 players, but we bring in guys, what's the phrase we always like to use? They'll be first team ready. So those guys will be ready to go straight into that team and to make an impact and to make a difference and to make a change. Those guys that you mentioned, the 4, as you say, they're not contributing. And see, if they're not contributing, then they'd be as well going somewhere where they can contribute, because they clearly don't have a future here. I think Ange made it perfectly clear early on that Sorrell was just not going to feature in his plans. And Barkas, Ajeti, and who's the other one you mentioned? Bolingoli, yeah. So I think we just you cut your losses. You try and see if you can get any kind of revenue in for them, and you take that and you just accept, right, okay, sometimes you call it wrong or it just doesn't work out for certain players, and you use any kind of funds you get to fund players that you really want at the club. Maybe those 2 from the Japanese that we mentioned, Hatate and Maeda. And I think those kind of players would excite the Celtic supporters much more than seeing the 4 pick up a wage and not contribute. You want players, 1, that are first team ready, and 2, that are going to contribute. And as you say, if they contribute, then Celtic will get consistent results moving forward. There'll be consistency in their play, and they'll be there or thereabouts come May.
Absolutely. I never mentioned Wanyama, but he was putting himself in the window as well for Celtic to go and get him in January. So we'll see how that tapers out. I mean, he's only 30. He's only 30 years of age, Tony. He's been playing over in Montreal.
Yeah.
I love the big guy. We'll see. We shall see. The other 4 players, Tony, as you say, you cut your losses. They're from a different regime, and we move on and we bring in more quality. I really enjoyed that today. I was joined today by Tony Haggerty and also an army of over 1,200 live on our various platforms. Unfortunately, not Twitter today. There was a wee issue between our streaming host and Twitter. Don't know what it is. Hopefully they can kiss and make up. But thanks for tuning on Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn and on Facebook. Get yourself subscribing on YouTube. I've still got 3 prizes to give away, but I was too busy to do it during the game. I will be announcing them at some point. I would say perhaps tomorrow, when Tony's maybe on the live stream tomorrow at 12:30 with Amy and Russell. But it's always great to talk Celtic, particularly when we're winning. However, there were protests, and we need to speak about that as well. There are some unhappy people supporting Celtic at the moment for other reasons, non-football reasons. So we will keep you abreast of all the developments, football and non-football, if it's anything to do with Celtic Football Club. All that's left for me to say is thank you once again, Tony Haggerty, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.